Hey you guys, this is Jerry Mateo with In the DAW. Welcome back. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Smash and Grab from Get Good Drums. Now, Get Good Drums is really well known for their drum samples, their contact libraries, and they essentially are a really well-known company for those of us who don't have a drummer or need a better drummer than the one we have. They make a lot of really great sounding stuff for metal, rock, indie music. And I believe this is their first plugin that's actually for mixing, and this is their Smash and Grab drum compressor. As you can see right here where it says drum types, it's essentially designed to help you tailor the sound of your drum kit with compression and some tone control in a very fast and efficient way. You have everything from snares, kicks, toms, rooms, overheads, and even parallel processing all in one little section. And the way that it works is you select the type and it will kind of predetermine the types of attack and release times that you're going to be using. As far as the controls go, it's pretty simple. You can control your external sidechain by turning it on and off right here. You can control your low cut for the detection, your high cut for the detection, and your look ahead right here. And you can hide it by clicking on the expand button. Your input section controls how you drive into the compressor plugin, while your output is your compensation afterwards. You can link this right here or hit the auto gain to have automatic gain reduction, even though I don't usually use this. One thing to keep in mind is that Smash and Grab seems to have some type of internal headroom, because when I crank it with the input, I do get saturation even when I'm not utilizing the saturation circuit. So that is one thing to keep in mind, and I noticed that it does actually help me get some pretty aggressive sounds without sounding like I'm doing anything really crazy to it. The next thing is the threshold control. This is when we start compressing. Then we have beef and air, and these are essentially two EQ parameters set before the compressor. Beef is obviously the low end, air is obviously the high end, and I don't know where they have them tuned to, but they sound great. They are really good at just tuning things in to sound either deeper or warmer or more snappy, and you can easily add or remove beef or air. I really like that. It's essentially having an EQ built into your compressor. The saturation control controls your saturation. You have three different types: soft clipping, tape saturation, and hard clipping. Now, the normal and extreme modes, I can't seem to find any real information on them on the website, but I'm assuming that it's the type of saturation you're going to be getting. Either way, I usually stick it to normal. I have the drum type selector, the mix knob for wet and dry, and then the last thing I want to talk about is the Smash and Grab sliders. This controls the type of compressor you're actually going to be using. Smash is a FET style compressor. Think of a really fast and aggressive 1176-ish style compression, while Grab is a VCA, a lot less aggressive, and it helps the transients poke out while also extending the tail, making things sound bigger and more aggressive. That's the UI. Really simple, really easy to use. So let's just get into the actual examples. I have Smash and Grab on the entire drum kit. Right here, this drum kit was part of a live recording session that my cousin's band was performing, and I basically slapped a bunch of mics, recorded the whole thing, meaning that this is actually a 100% live performance. There are mistakes, and I thought this would be a great example because I noticed a lot of people tend to use Get Good Drum stuff as a drum replacement. So I want to see how well it can do at actually making a bad sounding drum recording or something that doesn't have as much character as I want get to the level that I need it to be at. Let's start off by soloing up all the close mics and bypassing Smash and Grab, and let's just listen to it without anything going on. Now, one thing to keep in mind is I do have a gate on there, so if I bypass that gate, you can hear all the bleeding and all that stuff. Turn the gate back on. The drums sound okay, the kick sounds okay, the toms are okay, but I'm not a fan of the snare. So let's turn on Smash and Grab on everything once again, and let's just hear how it sounds. The kick sounds a lot more aggressive, it cuts through a lot better, and the snare just sounds way better. Let's take this out of solo, bypass Smash and Grab, so you can really hear how much the drum kit doesn't cut through without it. Let's turn Smash and Grab back on. Bypass it. Back on. The way that this is working is I have it on every single instance of the drums, and on the overhead I have it on the stereo input bus that I made. Let's just take a listen to it on the kick first. Let's just bypass it and take a quick look. So the kick sounds okay. I believe it was a D6 from Audix, so it had a lot of a already pre-emphasized EQ curve, but it had a lot of dynamics to it, and it wasn't really shaped the way that I wanted to. So I did a little bit of pre-EQing, and I still didn't like it. I needed to have a little bit more snap and attack. So what I did is I cranked the input of the smash and grab. I used the grab compressor mode to kind of make it have more of an aggressive punch. And by cranking the input, I'm actually utilizing some of the compression. I'm using about maybe 3 to 5 dBs of compression while adding a lot of beef and a ton of air. This coupled with just a tiny bit of saturation, I believe 4, and this is only tape style saturation, and of course using the kick drum type really added a lot of weight to the kick drum. Bypass it. Back on. It helps it cut through pretty substantially. It really does do a substantial amount of processing to it without actually doing much. Next, let's take a look at the snare drum. And for this one, I actually did a ton of processing by cranking the input by 14 dB. I set the threshold to do some pretty healthy amount of gain reduction. I'm cutting a tiny bit of beef, less than a dB, and I'm adding a lot of air. And then I'm using a ton of tape style saturation to add a lot of that thwack that I wanted. Let's go to this little roll right here and you can really hear it. We'll bypass it. Just sounds wimpy, thin. With it on, it sounds so much better. I'm getting a lot of saturation that's bringing up the non-existent bottom snare mic that I just didn't have. So it's really starting to sound like it. I really like tape saturation for that because it has a very interesting focus on the mid-range. So it can kind of mimic some snare bottom mic. Let's take this out of solo, bypass it, and then we'll put it back on. Right? Kind of thin, kind of wimpy, but with it on. Also, notice at the volume right here, it's not actually getting louder. It's actually a little bit quieter. With it on, we're actually saving ourselves some headroom. It's that saturation and soft clipping that's really helping it cut through. The toms are pretty simple. I have an instance of smash and grab on each and every one of them. They're all being set a little bit differently though. On the floor tom, I have it set to smash because I just wanted to control the transient. I'm only cranking it a tiny bit. I'm using a little bit of beef and not much air. I have the tiniest bit of saturation on the soft clipping mode. While on the middle tom, I have it on grab mode to kind of emphasize the peak because the transient just wasn't cutting through. Adding a ton of air, having a little bit more saturation, and I'm cranking it to get a little bit of clipping. And then on the first tom, I have it again on smash. Not much drive on the input. I'm having a little bit more compression and a little bit more beef, but I'm not really doing too much. I'm mostly adding some saturation. Let's bypass it on all the toms and take a listen, and then we'll turn it on. With it on, it's just adding a little bit of weight and a little bit of body. It's really subtle, but it's mostly just helping it sound bigger without making it sound too processed. Let's take it out of solo and let's get to straight to the part where it has the tom roll. And let's bypass it. It's subtle, but you will notice that the toms don't pop as much and they don't sound as heavy. So listen one more time to the tom roll. And we'll turn it on. Really simple, right? It sounds way better without actually doing much, and it doesn't sound like we're doing too much crazy processing to it. The next thing I want to do is I want to show you how easy it is to utilize smash and grab. So we'll go to a section like right here and solo up the snare. And let's actually bypass smash and grab, create a new one, and we'll reset every single section. Okay. So now let's listen to the snare as it is with no compression. So the first thing I'm noticing is it sounds a little bit papery and it doesn't really have a lot of body. Normally I would add beef, but I found that adding beef made it too dark. So I ended up actually cutting a tiny bit. And then I tried to use the air control to either add some snap or remove it. And since I wanted to have a little bit of snare bottom crack style sound to it, I decided to add some. Next, I linked the controls, I set it to grab mode, and I used the input to kind of get some saturation. And if I bypass it, we can turn the output gain up. Right away, you can hear that it is indeed saturating. So next, I can utilize the threshold control to get a couple of dBs worth of compression. And then we can add some tape style saturation to it. And there we go. We're pretty much good to go. Let's bypass it and turn it back on. And in the context of the mix, pretty good, right? If we take it out, it sounds wimpy and thin with it back on. It really does emphasize the transient and the snap of the snare drum while actually still compressing it and helping us get some general tone shaping. This actually saved a lot of processing. I could have done maybe a saturation plugin, a compressor, a EQ after that or before that, and then maybe even had a transient designer to get a similar kind of sound. But instead, I just need to use smash and grab mode, add a little bit of air, remove a little bit of beef, clip it a little bit, and then use a little bit of tape style saturation, and I'm good to go. So with that said, I think that's going to be it for this video. I hope you liked it. We're kind of trying to streamline our videos. Let us know if you're liking this new style of videos that we're making. I highly recommend grabbing a demo of the Get Good Drums Smash and Grab. You can get, I believe, a 14-day demo on their website. This is a really cool plugin, especially if you're doing rock and metal.